so that those that couldn't be here could, you know, could get it started. So again, you know, we're offering with the Arts Build, you guys are getting a little discount if you hire us to do any HR or bookkeeping or QuickBooks work. So we're hopefully we'll, you know, be able to work with you. We already work with some people that are here. So welcome, welcome. Today we're going to talk a little bit about handbooks, and you know, some of you, and if you guys will put in the chat whether you have a handbook or not, that will help us. You may have one. If it's super old, you can say that too, yes, but it's like not relevant, you know, then that means you need a new handbook. So if you can just put in the chat, we're working on it, we don't have it, or we have one, but it's old or something like that, that would help us out a lot. So a well-written handbook is really, it tells the employees about their sort of legal rights, and it also tells them what your culture is like and what you expect of them as an employee. And the legal things are things like, you know, ADA or workers' comp, or, you know, a harassment-free workplace. Those are sort of the legal things that you're saying, hey, our company takes this stand here, and this is our policy on, you know, harassment in the workplace, and this is what you do if you feel like you've been, somebody is harassing you. And it's best to go ahead and get those legal things out in the handbook, like right up front, to say this is our stance. You know, we're not going to tolerate this, or this behavior, so that those things are right up front in the handbook. But you know, merely having a handbook, and I know most handbooks that we see are pretty drab, and they're like, you know, boring. It's not enough just to have a handbook. You have to actually take the handbook, and then you have to follow it. And so if most of you are maybe directors, or you know, what your position is, or maybe you're on the board, you know, the board's responsible for a nonprofit, for the behavior and for the fiscal responsibility of the nonprofit. So you can't just have a handbook and say we're done. You have to follow the handbook and make sure that you're following it consistently. So one of the things with, you know, in general about nonprofits that we've found is that, you know, directors come and go, board chairs come and go, boards come and go, you know, office managers come and go, probably a little more quickly turned than maybe a regular, you know, for-profit company where you've got one owner, and that owner is consistent across 15, 20 years, and they can remember how they've talked to employees, or what they've said to employees, or how they reacted if an employee came and needed help or needed assistance. But the issue with nonprofits is that, you know, you might not know what your president did, you know, 8 years ago. And so it puts you in a little bit of a bad situation, in that, you know, for most nonprofits, we all feel good, right? We're like, we want to help, we have good hearts. And so we're like, you know, we just want to do what's right. An employee comes to you and they're like, look, I'm struggling here, or I need this, or I need a day off, or can I work Saturday instead of Friday? And, you know, most of us are like, yeah, and that's cool. But what you might not know is that, you know, somebody had done that before, and maybe the previous director said no, and now you've got these differences here of this is, you know, kind of outside the norm. And it's not a problem until it's a problem, until an employee comes forward and says, hey, I don't feel like I've been treated fair. You know, several years ago, somebody did the same thing and you let them do it, and now you're not letting me do it. And so a handbook, you know, maybe will help with that, help with the consistency through the different directors or through the different boards. You know, cultures change, and so you just want to make sure that your handbook is reflecting your culture, and it's not just a bunch of like legalese that people read and just like roll their eyes and just flip the pages, then they sign the document at the back because it's so freaking boring they can't even like understand it. We want to make sure that the handbook is written in at a level that is you know, interpreted and reflects the current culture of what you're trying to do. I hope that makes sense. So the first slide I just want to talk about is, you know, here's just some of the employee handbook issues, and you may know about all these already. So, and you can put in the chat too. When you joined this the organization that you're joining now, like, did you read your employee handbook? Like, you know, did you actually read it, and did did you find anything in there that was surprising or not surprising, you know? Or maybe you're like, it was so long ago you read it, but you've never looked at it again. And so really, if you read it, signed it, never looked at it again, then it's probably not super relevant on your mind right now. But historically, employee handbooks have been really long because what happens is they started out with kind of like our policies. This is what you do if you're sick. This is how you do your time card, right? This is, you know, what you do to sign up for health insurance. And then they got, you know, the lawyers got a hold of them and they got longer and longer and longer. And some of the handbooks may be 40 or 50 pages long. And that's just really too long for an employee handbook. It's not, it doesn't have to be everything, you know. But historically, they're too long. And so a lot of times when Lauren and I are looking to update your handbook, we might be cutting some of the fat out of it so that it's more relevant and readable to the employee. Trying to take some of the legalese out of it, but yet keeping it enough so that it would, you know, stand up in court. A lot of times the employee handbooks are never mentioned again after orientation. You need to be having conversations with your employees about the employee handbook, just bringing it up. Maybe there's certain topics. And just many of your employee handbooks are outdated. So you can look and see your handbook, you know, pull it up and see, does it have a current social media policy? How about, you know, we have all these people doing this tobacco stuff, you know, these vaping things or all kind of tobacco products that some people find, you know, offensive or whatever. So what is your policy on vaping and all of that? So just, you know, a well-written handbook can really help you as the director to set the culture and examples for the employee. So if it's not updated, then why would it stand up in court if something happened? And you said, well, look, it says it right here in the handbook. You know, why would it stand up when the person says, look, nobody has even looked at that in 5 years. You know, you're not gonna, it doesn't work if you have a handbook that nobody's looking at. So that's that. And I'm gonna let, I'm gonna go ahead and admit this person because I'm not sure. So I'm gonna let Lauren talk about the next slide here. So
sure, thank you so much, Lynn. I want to stress, don't count how many times we say handbook or communication, because if we're playing a game or taking a shot every time, y'all would be on the floor, because I know that there's no other words we can really use. But so yeah, Lynn, thank you for covering all that. So we just kind of want to drill down in the basics of what is the handbook, what it's generally not used for, and then kind of go through an example on the basic sections of what an effective employee handbook is. So a lot of those might not even pertain to your business, but we'll just kind of show you examples and discuss the hot topic ones. And then also it really just ties back to how the handbook can support your culture. So first we'll get into what is a handbook. Like Lynn kind of said, it's always kind of a document that can go stale on a shelf, but so the employee handbook is a communication tool that can be used to ensure the effective job performance by defining behaviors and expectations that support your company culture. So what does that mean and how is it effective? So generally, whenever you open the handbook, you want to kind of see what your mission and values are. I always say that this is kind of your hype statement for, you know, you just got hired at your new job, you read it, you want to see, you know, what's good with the company, and reading that and what the company's passionate about and kind of get the history of what's behind the company, how they started. It really gets you excited, you know, about where you're working, and kind of you can measure what's important to the company. Does that match your values? If so, then you can kind of go into everything else. But I always think it's good to start there and kind of convey that message to the employee or potential employee. Let's see. So then using your handbook as a communication tool is beneficial when you have all the information in one place for employees to review early on in the employment relationship. An employee can see what's expected from them, and then you can also set expectations for your leadership team so they can review that pretty early on. Because a lot of the policies, like the harassment policy that Lynn touched on, and attendance and things like those, expectations would go all the way up to the CEO. So nobody should be exempt from those. And you can set out the expectations really early on. And having the handbook with everything written will show you that it's written out fairly and consistently. So that will help you to hold all of your team members accountable and get them all on the same playing field. And it also shows them what to expect when something does happen or an issue does come awry. If you had to terminate a team member, you never want it to be a shock. So having those policies and procedures laid out in one place to kind of direct them back to will always be a good safety net for your company. One thing that I wanted to touch on is that you don't have to put specific information to every position in your handbook. You're kind of talking in broad terms for the policies and procedures that go over for every single position. So like pay information or timekeeping, that's stuff that affects every position. But if you had, specific hours or schedules for a janitorial position and it might not be the same as an accounting position, you wouldn't want to put that specific scheduling or anything in the handbook. That would be kept in the job description. We can always help you with job descriptions, but I just want to be clear, you're not expected to touch on every single specific role or job in your handbook. So this does all go back to your state laws and compliance. Unfortunately, it's not a matter of when, but kind of if you could face a lawsuit or wrongful termination or discrimination claim from a current or former employee. So when this does happen, the very first thing that you'll get asked is for a copy of your handbook. And it's always the best defense because no employee can really state that they weren't aware of a policy when it's clearly stated in your handbook and you have the signed acknowledgement by them. So it's always the very important first piece in litigation if something does arise or when something does arise. Let's see, I know I'm going out of order here, but your benefits. So you spend a lot of money and effort trying to find benefits for your team. So this is your opportunity to kind of showboat them in your handbook. And you can kind of list out the different vendors that you use and contact information for your team members. And that will help eliminate the back and forth with you guys, and they'll know where to go and not get the runaround whenever they're asking who to contact with those questions. So, and that can go the same with anything else, but of course with vendors and stuff, I think of typical benefits information, but.
Yeah, and one of the things to add with that, Lauren and I were talking earlier, is, your employee handbook doesn't have to have all the details of those benefits. It will just say, after a year of service, you're eligible for a 401k. Please, we don't need to put the 30-page document of the 401k in there. Please see the director for information or something like that. Or same with the health insurance. We offer variety health insurance. It's available, whatever, 60 days after employment, 30 days. You have to be full-time like that. Please see.
Exactly.
The director when you're eligible, or if you have any questions, because it'll just be very very simple and broad, like Lauren said, because those details change, and you and I don't even know. Y'all are getting ready to have a health insurance thing, it sounds like, Thursday night, and they'll probably change from there till January. So yeah, but any questions about any of these for like what is an employee handbook? And you're welcome to unmute too if you have one, or we can pop in the chat. I can't get the chat open right now. Any questions? Okay. So we'll go into the next section here for Lauren.
Yes. So then we'll kind of talk about what a handbook is not. The key word here is effective, because there's not really guidelines on what it cannot be. We can advise you, of course, on what we don't recommend, or, what you typically shouldn't have. But so I want, what we find that typically effective ones do not have in it. First thing, so you never want to have your employee handbook be seen as a contract or a guarantee of an employment tenure or anything. So an example of how this can be kind of misconstrued is when your handbook could discuss a 90-day probationary period. A lot of employees will read this and think, score, that means they have to keep me employed for 90 days. But that is not how it should be perceived. So you just want to make it clear on what that means. And then, of course, if you're an at-will, which you all should be in Tennessee, then make it clear that you can terminate employment for any reason at any time, and the employee can also terminate any reason at any time. So you just want to make it clear it's not a guarantee for anything because they signed the handbook. And you don't want to put any information that can contradict your mission and values. Sometimes policies and procedures can be argumentative for what your business is trying to achieve. So kind of that thou shalt not list of everything that you put in there, and all of your hard no's can really contradict what your mission and values are. So you never want to put any contradicting statements like that. The book of thou shalt nots is what the next thing is. But so you just think about when you start a new job, the last thing that you probably want to look at is a list of everything you cannot do and have it be just kind of the hammer. You want it to be a flexible document to where you can kind of change and add things, because a lot of times we'll see stuff that could potentially get close to the line of being a hard no, but it'll kind of let you need to have the room to make a decision to be firm. So you don't want to have to go back to that handbook and then put you in a position where you could potentially, do something different than what you have written on paper. So we want to say, just don't make it a list of thou shalt nots. Your handbook should be the same for all team members in your organization up to the CEO. The policies and procedures that are outlined are the same for everybody, and the goal is always to be fair and consistent. When you're fair and consistent, you don't have too much, to worry about coming. I mean, claims will come in, but as long as you're being fair and consistent, you should always be able to defend them. And a good handbook really holds you accountable to that. Of course, and like Lynn said, it's impossible to capture every policy and procedure in the handbook. And so you don't want to, it does give you the opportunity to be contradictory, and you'll also lose your team members from reading it if it is, over 100 pages or something. And you also want to think about too, this is supposed to be a working document that you need to have, but you also need to go ahead and think about revisions and keeping it up to date. So once you get it rolled out and everything, I mean, a good example of this would be COVID. Pretty much every company would need to go back and add in, a provision about COVID now, because it's all just kind of happened and nobody knew that it was going to happen. So if you had a 500-page handbook, you don't want to have to go back and revise all of that, so I just recommend keeping it short. So you want to think about it like a working document and not set in stone or anything like that. Let's see. So that's pretty much everything it is not considered to be. If you have any questions, like Lynn said, just leave them over in the chat, or feel free just to unmute or anything. Now we'll kind of move into the basic sections of a handbook. Hopefully you guys are all kind of familiar with these and have seen them before. Not all of these do pertain to every business, so just make sure, just because you see it on here doesn't mean it has to go in your handbook or anything. And if you have any questions, we'll be happy to help. Like I said, one statement you always want to keep in there is the at-will, and since Tennessee is an at-will statement, it's always important to keep that in there. So then after the kind of general and information, your hype statement about your company, then you'll move into your employment policies. So this is when you set the expectations and make it clear. And you also talk about the next important thing, which is how they're going to get paid. Money. So you want to make clear what your paydays are, you know, the deductions, how you'll get scheduled, and what your hours of business and work are, how they'll be clocking in or not clocking in, and the program. So this is kind of the general information that is very important to the employee. So you want to make sure it's clear and laid out so they'll kind of read it through it and not have any questions or anything. Let's see, we have one question in the chat. What's the best way to create a handbook when you have only 1 or 2 employees and most are part-time? Let's see. I think you still would write it generally for every, because most policies would be the same whether they're full-time or part-time. So you want to make sure you touch on your harassment, attendance. I think we'll kind of go through those in this slide because a lot of them will be the same no matter how much the team member is working or anything like that. You could include the verbiage still about clocking in and how they'll get paid and pay dates and everything like that. But the policies, I would say you'd want to focus on more in that scenario. Lynn, do you have anything else?
Yeah, and I was just thinking the same thing. You know, when I first started too, when I had three or four employees and some were part-time, I was like, oh, I don't, you know, create the 35-page handbook. So I just started small and I just included what's going to be on this next section, equal opportunity, and then how you get paid. And, you know, especially if it's a small company, pretty much if you have any issues, just talk to me, talk to the director, and making sure that that's clear, that there's a kind of an open door policy that if I'm missing something or if I forget to do something, that an open door policy to come and let me know right away, because really it's just all about communication. And I think that if you can, a lot of people will have that in their handbook. We have an open door policy. I'm like, well, what does that mean? It only means what the director is willing to do. And so if the director is constantly saying, please come to me if you have any problems, that really helps as well, because that'll just sort of be a catch-all, like here's the rules on how to do these 10 kind of policies on these things. And then after that, if there's any issues, they can just come to you. But start with something, and you can start with a handbook that's just maybe 8 or 10 pages, especially if you just got part-time people. It's still, like Lauren says, just sets those expectations and gets consistency, because if you leave, then at least the person after you can say, well, here's what we've been following. Okay, now we need to add a few more things to it because we've stepped into this arena or that arena. So I always say start with something small. 1 employee, probably not. 2, 3 is kind of the threshold when you're like, you need it. 2, I think you can, if you can handle it's fine, but it's always safe to do it. And you can what you don't need to do is go online and find some 50-page template, from Coca-Cola or something, and download it and change the name, because it doesn't make any sense, So you just need to start from scratch and just, this is the mission, this is the EEO and the harassment and all that type of things. And does that make sense? And I apologize, for some reason I can't see the chat, because up here you can see my screen. I don't have the chat anywhere, and so I'm just scrambling. So I apologize. I was going to monitor it, but I guess when
I'm looking at it, it's fine.
Okay, when I show the screen, it's not there. See, I thought maybe it was down here and I just couldn't find it. So oh, there it is. But if I click on it, I think, let's see if it will. I don't know where it went. I still can't see it. I thought maybe it would go on that my presentation. So I'm still learning too. You know how it is. So
right.
If you can see it, that's great. But I apologize, for some reason I'm not technically savvy enough to figure out how to see it. All right, so I'll let Lauren go to the next.
Okay. Yes, so like Lynn said, these are kind of the compliance pieces. This is the most important verbiage in your handbook, besides what's important to your company with the mission and values and stuff. So the one statement that you'll see generally in most handbooks is, this is some verbiage that we have. The company does not discriminate and will not permit discrimination or harassment of any person on the basis of race, color, religion, national origin, gender orientation, or identity, age, disability, or veteran status. Any form of harassment or discrimination that violates federal, state, or local law, including but not limited to which is related to an individual's race, color, religion, national origin, sex, age, disability, citizenship status, veteran status, genetic information, sexual orientation, transgender identity, or pregnancy is a violation of this policy and will be treated as a disciplinary matter. So that statement kind of covers every protected class that there is. And so it shows that, you'll take any form of harassment and discrimination seriously. Always say that, it'll be investigated immediately. And then you can go into more of an open book policy about what to do if the team member does have a concern or anything. So then you'll make sure that you point out the company will monitor and adhere to federal, state, and local laws to ensure fair and equal treatment for all employees. So that's good verbiage to kind of make sure you're covered under every scenario that could come up with discrimination, harassment, disability, religion, any kind of offensive behavior that can occur. Your benefits, this is what we kind of touched on. These are some good examples on what the team member can expect, and also have those vendor contacts and know what's pertaining to their employment in this section. So that's where you can showboat. Paid time off and employee leave. This is another section that needs to be written very carefully. Attendance, you always want to touch on and make clear what your expectations are, because of course regular attendance and punctuality are the most important thing for the business. So team members need to be aware of what you consider to be poor attendance or excessive absences. Just make sure that that's kind of clearly defined, so then it's not a shock whenever you do have to hold them accountable, because unfortunately, every company will probably have somebody with a poor attendance record. So it's just a matter of when it could come up. So you always want that laid out clearly in your handbook. Switching to PTO, that's kind of the number one topic. Everybody has questions about accruals, rollover, those kind of things. So you want that clearly stated in the handbook. Also, so they won't have any questions about whenever it comes around. I'm sure that they still will, but you'll have it laid out in there. Leave of absences, of course, you want to cover that. And there's some, you could get dinged also if you didn't have the right verbiage. So it's important to make sure you have, if you are eligible for FMLA, like if you have over 50 employees, that you have that verbiage in there, ADA and other things with medical leave. And of course, COVID now, you'll want to make sure you have all of that written out clearly and fairly in your leave of absence policies.
And one of the things for that PTO, I know this is where we see a lot of not just nonprofits, but I see it more in the nonprofit world, because we do the books too, and often we'll be doing payroll. And somebody says, hey, I should have 2 weeks of vacation, but I don't know who's keeping it. And the person that's keeping it maybe has a different number than the person has it in their head. And I find that a lot of nonprofits just don't keep it written down. They just kind of go with the flow. And yeah, I think they have 6 days. I don't know. And that's really a bad situation, because the Department of Labor, Tennessee Department of Labor requires by law that you keep timesheets and time tracking when people work. And then that PTO has to, like, whatever you say it is, okay, you get 1 day a month or 1 day every 15 or pay period or something like that, a half a day every pay period, or maybe a certain number of hours, per pay period. You have to follow that and abide by that. And so the handbook is they're going to go back and say, hey, it says I get, 10 holidays a year and maybe 10 PTO, which is vacation. And but when do they take it? Can they take it their first month? Did they have to accumulate it? Did they just get, boom, 2 weeks the first day they start, or they get 2 weeks after a year. It's very different. And you can set some of those rules. You just have to be consistent. But we find a lot of times, and right now we're working with two big nonprofits on recreating all of their PTO, because for 2 years it just kind of got off track and people were just taking time. And once they figured out that nobody was paying attention, and this is a large nonprofit, they've got like 50 employees, so it's a lot of tracking. But you put them up on something like a Paychex or an ADP where there's a time tracking in there, it really makes a difference. And all it takes is one person to call the Department of Labor. They can just go online now and file a complaint that I don't think I'm getting paid overtime, or I don't think I got my PTO. That's all they have to say, and boom, you're audited. And if you don't have clear records, it's really not going to go in your favor very well, and it's just going to be difficult for everybody. Nobody wants an audit from the Tennessee Department of Labor. And I will tell you that for some reason, about 2 years ago, I don't know what was going on, but the Tennessee Department of Labor was auditing nonprofits like crazy. Every time I turned around, someone would call and say, we're under audit, come help us. We need to recreate all this stuff. And we just couldn't quite figure it out why that was happening. So nonprofits are not immune. They get pulled in probably more so than, at least we see, more so than some of our regular for-profit. And some of that has to do with the volunteer time. So, and we haven't quite gotten into that, but some people, like a nonprofit says, oh yeah, I want to work, Saturday for that walk, and I'll work, that'll be great. Well, they've already worked their 40 hours. Tennessee employment law says you have to pay them time and a half. And you'll say, well, they're just volunteering. Well, that's not allowed. So you have to be clear, being clear of your expectations is being kind to the employee. Clear is kind. If you're not clear, that's not very kind to the employees. And as nonprofits, we want to be as kind and open and honest as we can be. And by not having your paid time off, how you track your hours and things like that, those are the things that can get you into trouble pretty quickly. And it kind of blindsides you, because you're like, well, we're honest, we've done all this stuff, and you just maybe didn't realize that the person was sort of manipulating you, and you found yourself in this situation. And that's when you call us, and we'll try to help you figure out, well, look at the handbook. What do the employees say? When did they say it? What did you say back? Okay, well, you need to pay them overtime. This is how it works. But if you have questions like that, those are the things we can help you with a quick phone call. And that's why we want to partner with you guys, so you don't go off on an island and feel like you're all alone. Like, because none of you went to school to be, to learn HR. I don't know if you have an HR degree, let me know. But other than that, I doubt any of you did, got an HR degree. So these things make you a little nervous, and they should, but I don't want you to feel alone. I want you to feel like you can just call Lauren and I, and we can walk you through it. A lot of times it's just an affirmation, isn't it, Lauren? Like, you're doing it right. Yes, thank you for calling, and you're doing everything right. And that makes you feel good too. So.
Let's see, we got a question. So since you mentioned holidays and we're approaching the holiday season, what's the best approach to accommodating religious holidays that aren't Christmas? I think the best approach is to give them the time off that's requested, as long as it's not a hardship on the business, which typically holidays aren't, since you're going to be closed for Christmas anyways. You could potentially ask if they would want to use it as a floating holiday to cover other holidays or something like that you could work it out. But a lot of the times December could be slow for your business anyways, so it's not going to create any kind of hardship or anything to kind of give them the time off. It's always best and fair if you can give the employee the time off, because then you're not having to defend why you're deciding not to, unless you have a firm business reason where, like, it's going to cost us this money to give them the time off. We only have this much money. We're going to be in the hole or something like that. If you could show that, then you can say no. But most scenarios, whenever it's just a few days off, I recommend give them the time off that they need. Lynn, if you disagree or anything, please
And
jump
that,
in.
that sounds good. And I see a lot of people implementing these, and Lauren touched on it, like floating holidays. You know, you can
Mhm.
say, look, you get 10 PTO off a year. I don't care if you take it as vacation, sick leave, take care of your sick child. It's time, it's paid time off. That's why we avoid the word vacation pay, because we all know that you're not always going on vacation when you take time off. You'd like to, but you're not. But paid time off is just like, you can do whatever you want. You don't have to tell me. If you have a separate holiday, then our businesses are closed at, then you can take it then. But you could also do like floating holidays. Very large corporations will say that you get 10 holidays, you know, please let us know. And of course, they need to let the supervisor or whoever know ahead of time, and not just, you know, not show up on some holiday that maybe you don't have, you know, on your calendar that you're open. It could be a religious holiday. So the floating holidays are great too. You get 10, pick them. These are the 8 that were closed, or 10 that were closed. I mean, a lot of people aren't necessarily closed on, you know, I mean, Columbus Day or something. Banks are closed, but so some of those holidays are kind of not really holidays. You know what I mean? They're just bank holidays, and so if they want to use them. But yeah, looking for some wording for floating holidays is nice. And then that PTO, people can always take their PTO for anything they want, and if they have it, they just need to take it. And then if, like you say, you can work out something else, but you just have to be consistent. If somebody comes up next year and they want a different holiday, or a strange holiday that you've not heard of, you got to just remember what you said to the other person.
Exactly. We have another question. Yeah. Should policies for volunteers and interns be created separately from the employee handbook development? I would say include verbiage in your handbook that discusses volunteers and interns. So then they're still reading your mission, your values, and everything like that. And then just because they are volunteers or interns, it wouldn't make them exempt from your harassment policies. So they'll still kind of be aware of what you are enforcing within your company. So I think that they should still be included and just have separate verbiage about, you know, like timekeeping or anything. If they have to register their hours differently, you can say for volunteers and interns, do this under the same paragraph and stuff. So I would just include separate verbiage geared directly towards them.
Yeah, and like,
Another question, yeah.
yeah, and like Lauren said, you know, they still have to abide by harassment. You know, we teach harassment too, and you know, harassment is, you know, can be done by internal, external. The, you know, the Coca-Cola man coming to put in the vending machine. It can be done by vendors and volunteers and things like
Yes.
that. And most of you probably have a code of conduct for volunteers. If you don't, that would be something that you need to have, and something maybe we could touch base on. But there should be a standard code of conduct, and it would include, I mean, just verbatim, like Lauren said, all the harassment and the, you know, everything you do should be expected to contribute to our mission, you know. And if you're doing something and it's not, you know, positively reflected on our mission, then that would be a time to be able to talk to them. But you're right, you've got to talk to not only employees, but you've got to be able to delicately handle volunteers who may feel like they can just kind of do whatever, you know, because
Right.
maybe they're, you know, I don't know, they just sometimes feel like they don't have to abide by some of the rules. And that code of conduct, I've seen that before. Do you guys have any a code of conduct? If somebody has one, maybe they can, we can share that, and Amy we can work from that, and collaborate on a code of conduct, you know.
Let's see. Back to we got another question about the holidays. So I'll cover this one and then we'll kind of move through because I don't want to hold anybody up. But are there standard holidays in addition to, say, 10 days of PTO? Example, Christmas, Thanksgiving, and 4th of July. In my experience, this depends on the business because I think of the holidays being the days the business is closed and when you would receive holiday pay, as opposed to, like Lynn mentioned, Columbus Day or something where if the business is open and operating and a team member wanted to take the time off for that, you would have them be paid by using their PTO. So I would think about it as the holidays being the days the business is closed and you're using that as holiday pay. And then your PTO is kind of like your vacation, personal, sick days, and things like that. So then you're kind of coding it as PTO or holiday, I would say. Let's see. I'll get to that next question after the next slide. But so, and then I want to cover our office conduct. Just some general information, the thou shalt nots in this one. Some big hot topic policies right now in the HR world is social media. So there's not a lot an employer can control about what employees post to their personal social media pages. But you can provide them with guidelines on what's okay and what's not okay. Of course, no company wants to be badmouth on social media for the whole world to see, but a prohibition against an employee's speech that could reflect negatively on the company may violate the employee's rights under the Section 7 of the National Labor Relations Act. So we call it the NLRA if you hear that, or NLRB that kind of enforces that. So to reduce the likelihood that an employee's personal use of social media will have an adverse effect on the company, we suggest that employees or businesses add a disclaimer to their post, or the employees add a disclaimer to their post. So it states that this is the employee's opinion on social media, and they're not tied to the company or reflect anything the company stands for. Of course, not all team members will do that, but you can still ask to make sure that they do that. And if they identify themselves as working for the company in their about, like on Facebook or anything, or on LinkedIn, you can always suggest that if they are going to post anything that pertains to the business, that they do kind of add that disclaimer. But the downside is that you can't hold them accountable if they don't do that. Cell phones is also kind of a hot topic, but of course, as a society, we use cell phones as a tool for daily use. You can even use your watch now. So it's really hard to develop a fair cell phone policy, especially when your directors and everything kind of have their cell phone tied to their face most of the time. Then you go around and get on all your employees for having theirs out or something, you know. But experience suggests that you either need to have a completely restrictive policy of no cell phones or a completely open policy. A completely open policy about restricting what or when they're on them. And then you would want to tie it back to progressive discipline so you can hold them accountable if they're not following your practices for having it out. And then that goes back to being fair and making sure you're really holding everybody accountable. I kind of touched on progressive discipline. So this is, of course, another hot topic in the HR world, but these are the steps and documentation used to hold a team member accountable. So when you provide your progressive discipline steps in the handbook, it shouldn't be a shock to anybody on where they are in the process if and when you end up having to terminate their employment. So the typical path that we use is verbal warning, then to a written warning, then to a final warning, and then terminating employment. So if the team member reads the handbook and then they realize that, oh my gosh, I'm on a final warning, that means I can get terminated if anything happens again. Ideally, it wouldn't be a shock, but as opposed to if you didn't have these steps in there and then you ended up terminating them and they're like, what are you talking about? I didn't know I was even on a final warning or that was the next step. Whenever they are shocked from a termination, they're always going to be more upset and likely to get into some form of litigation. Let's see. So that's the basic kind of sections. And then the acknowledgement form, I just want to say that's the most important piece, because then you're showing that you acknowledge that you've read the handbook and that it's out there. I think we've kind of all touched on this and how it supports your culture. It's all about communication and the expectations and getting it out there. You want to be clear, you want to be fair, you want to make sure that they're aware of what's okay, what's not okay. You want it to be effective. And whenever all of this is kind of working, it all helps support your culture and drive your mission and your values. And it really does help set the expectations for your supervisors to make their jobs easier and treat their people fairly. So I think it all goes back to supporting the culture. Let's see. Oh, we have a question. So also several other nonprofits in other cities are moving toward unlimited PTO. How would that look in a handbook, or is there a whole different topic to deal with later? We did not cover unlimited PTO in this presentation, but I'm aware that a lot of companies are moving towards it. So I would need to read up on more verbiage that they use, but my friends that have worked for companies that do that, it all kind of goes back to what the manager approves. So you don't really have any number of hours that you can take in a year, but the verbiage includes it's at the manager's discretion pretty much. So it makes me nervous because you could plan a big vacation, you know, have in your mind, have the time off and have it approved. And then a week before, your manager could say, oh no, we got this big project. You got to, you know, take care of this. And there's nothing in your handbook that kind of protects you from that. So that's a downside that I think for as an employee and a company, it makes it harder. And like Lynn mentioned, the timekeeping about it, but I think it's kind of a, I don't want to say millennial way of thinking, because it's something that employees read and they get, oh my gosh, unlimited PTO, that's amazing, you know, but the admin side of it and the HR perspective of it is it's not the best policy to have. But if that's something that you're moving towards and you want to kind of build that excitement and you think it will be fairly administered in your organization, then by all means, you know, we'll be happy to kind of discuss it more so you are protected in those scenarios. And Lynn, if you have anything, if you're more familiar with it, then go ahead.
No, my son joined a firm in New York, like a sort of like a Wall Street firm, and they have unlimited. And I'm laughing because he's been there 5 years, and I don't think he's taken but a week of vacation because he's like, oh, they say that, but really, it's called like results oriented. So so they're like, look, if this takes you 6 hours to do this presentation or whatever he's doing, that's fine. If it takes 40, that's fine. So they're more results oriented. And you know, you as your mission, you might have the same thing. You might say, okay, you know, this season we're doing our golf tournament. As soon as everything's done with the golf tournament, you know, we really, you know, you can have time off after that or whatever. And based on how well they did, somebody, but like Lauren said, is the manager going to say, yes, you did well? Or, I mean, it's just subjective, you know, instead of like, yes, you have 2 weeks. I've asked for it off. You take it off, and everybody's going to say that's okay. So it's interesting, but yeah, it's a lot of the younger things. But I think if you just approve things on a case by case basis and you're just fair and consistent, you know, especially now with a lot of people got the PPP and you know, some of your programs may be shut down and you're just trying to keep your employees busy, you know, and maybe you do need to give more paid time off because there's just not enough to do. But if you don't have the money, then you need to be able to back it up and say, I don't have the money. We've got just a few minutes, so I'm going to just go through this little handbook basic real quick. And this is just for you guys who maybe don't have a handbook. If you have at least 3 employees, you should start, you know, thinking about having a handbook. And again, it can be very short, just 5 or 10 pages. But the average length of a handbook is somewhere between 30 and 40 pages. You know, with a smaller nonprofit, you can probably get by with a smaller amount. And then you just add to it as you need, or as you grow, or as, you know, employees become, you know, more complex, because they always do. And then one of the things is, if you're writing your handbook, just try to keep the sentences to less than 20 words. So that's another legal thing that our lawyers always get us on, because run-on sentences or sentences that are combined can often mean different things the way you read them. So by keeping a sentence short, this is the fact, and this is the fact, not this and this, or this if this, or this because of this. It's like each one is its separate sentence, because you think about pulling a sentence out, and somebody's taking you to court or whatever, and you're pulling that one sentence out, and maybe it's sort of a little bit out of context, but will that sentence stand alone? So you just want to make sure you're not just doing giant paragraphs that are sort of mushy. You want each sentence to be very distinctive. And a lot of times handbooks don't have any pictures or anything in them, and we always say add some interest to it. If you've got something you want to add, have your logo on there, your mission, have a picture of the people that you've helped for your mission, maybe smiling faces, something like that. Think of how nice that would be after reading 5 pages of boring harassment stuff that you saw. Here are the smiling faces that you're helping. And just remember that this is our mission, and we're just giving you this information because that's your mission. And the other thing is you should date every page, because you're going to be updating it. And it's easier just to take that page out and update and say, November 16th, this is the new policy for that one. Insert the page, and then again have everybody sign it. Sometimes you can just have them sign that one page if it's just something that is singular, but sometimes you want to do it overall. But date every page. It's amazing how quickly you'll say, well, when did that go with the original, or is that a new one? And how quickly we forget, and then you can't really prove that that page was there on the original document. Does that make sense? And so, so we're here to help you in conjunction with Arts Build. You can call our office number there. You can email us or email Amy or James and say you need help, and they'll bring you in. And like Lauren said, we can do specific HR documents like employee handbooks or job descriptions. Usually starting with an employee handbook helps everybody get together and say, yes, these are the policies that reflect our culture, and then we can help with the wording of that, so that those documents, anything we create, will kind of tie back to your mission. How do you create a job description so that person is motivated, and it ties back to your mission? You have to remember that every time, not just you answer the phone, you do this stuff, you log this in QuickBooks, you greet the guest. Well, how does that tie to the mission? And so we can help you with that. And by building the handbook first, that gets us the culture and everything. And then the job descriptions usually come in behind that. And so, with job descriptions become performance reviews. If you're not doing performance reviews, you need to be doing them. And of course, what are the basis that you're doing? They should be tied to the job description, And job descriptions are fluid. They're going to be updated all the time as people come in and go. Especially now, you might be doing a little downsizing, and you may be combining some or adding some responsibilities on, and you just need to be able to keep those up to date all the time. And then if you're reviewing somebody on it, you want them to have the same, this is what I'm reviewing you on. You don't want it to be a surprise. So getting the job descriptions out and then giving them 6 months to, make sure everything looks great, and then doing a review is kind, I guess I would say. You want to be very kind. But yeah, we can help with any of the things that you want. But sometimes it's just the hardest part is just getting started with a small nonprofit. Where do I start? And we say the employee handbook is the best place to start. Start gathering up documents. And we have some templates too that we can share with you. We kind of have a template, and then we can, just take things out that you don't need, and then add things, that are more towards your mission. And then you can start with that template and then build from there. But the last thing I want to say is that, a handbook is a legal document. And so it does need to be reviewed by a lawyer probably at the end. We are not attorneys, so anything you see here is just, HR. Lauren and I both have HR degrees and business. We're not lawyers, but when you finish it, and the template that we have has been reviewed by a lawyer. So if you're going to go change it a lot, then you'll need to have another lawyer look at it, because it's funny how 1 or 2 words were in there for a specific reason, because somebody prior had filed a complaint, and those little words meant something. And so sometimes just taking those out nonchalantly is not, we would say, whoa, here's why you have to have that in there, because this little girl one time went over to this, so we can help you with our experience, and that's really what we want to do. But I do encourage you, if you don't have a handbook, to get started. If you have one, pull it out and start line ironing and redlining it out, and then we can give you backfill that with some information and help you create a really nice document. And it's a lot of back and forth. It doesn't happen in just, you know, a day or two or even a week, because you're going to want to get maybe somebody on your board to help you with it, and board approval for it and things like that. So that's it. But we are open for questions. And I think, let's see if I go one more page. Yeah, there we go. So this is just our last page there. But any questions? And I guess if somebody can see the chat, I think I finally figured out how to see it. Finally found it. I had to open it up. Anything else? Just unmute if you want to. Amy, do you have anything to add?
I don't, and if no one else has any questions, just for the sake of time, because I know everybody's got busy schedules. So both Lauren and Lynn have provided us with their contact information earlier on in the chat here. So I just want to thank everybody for being with us today, and thank Lynn and Lauren for giving us a very in-depth presentation, which I know everybody will be able to use. This was recorded today, so if you need to go back and review anything, or you know, get some more information, you can definitely check that out on our Artsville YouTube page. But if there are no other questions, then I guess this would be a good time to close, and hopefully we'll see everybody again on Thursday evening for the Affordable Healthcare for the Arts presentation. So thanks so much, ladies.
Yep, and we'll be back. We're going to do one every month, I think. So we'll be back.
Yes, we'll see you next month.
Thank you.
All right, and happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
It's been a pleasure.